Mr. Tarbey, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. Lovely to be here.
Indeed it is. Did you have a decent weekend?
I did. And I just caught the tail end of Jamie and language as I was running up. I have to go and check with my son and daughter and see what they've got in store for me now. I might understand them a little bit more.
I think you might. Well, you know, generations come up with new language all the time. You probably see some new terms in real estate, I bet.
You get quite a few, don't you? And people are starting to bring them up into acronyms. We've got a lot of acronyms floating around the industry now. A lot of people try to work out what they are, but I think in the IT world, I would say they hold the record for acronyms, because I'm still trying to work out what an API is or what an XML feed is. And some of the guys you talk to, you ask them the question, they can't even answer it. So
that's very
quite
true.
Interesting, yeah.
What is for sure, though, when you started 40-odd years ago, the internet was not
You've got to stop this, Nick.
Oh, okay. Well, when you started 9 years ago as a young fella,
yes,
we just didn't have the net capabilities of what...
We did not.
And real estate is so well represented on the internet now, isn't it?
It is. I had the most modern technology out of any real estate practitioner. I had a PC with floppy disk, which was very rare, and I had a facsimile. I was the first one to get a facsimile. Of course, the problem was that nobody I knew had one, so I couldn't send anything with it. It sat there idle for a little while.
But you could send yourself a Christmas card.
Thanks. Yeah. The way you, that sounds like a Mr. Bean gag. The way you search real estate now compared to then, I mean, you'd sit down in those, say in the Melbourne papers or the Sydney paper, Sydney Morning Herald, they'd have these little line ads, and I honestly don't know, when I look back, how in heaven's name you could have searched something quickly enough to understand what was going on compared to today. So.
There was no pace attached to it back then at all. I mean, and it was very common to find ads for houses in classified sections, really simple, sometimes even no pictures. And if you were selling your home and you wanted a big campaign, you'd have to get a fancy photographer to come out, and you'd pay a few $1,000s for a big spread in a newspaper, wouldn't you?
You wouldn't. One of the things the internet has done is brought the country into the city, because the country areas, regional areas, it would have been way too expensive for them to advertise their properties in the Sydney Morning Herald or the Melbourne Age or the Courier Mail in Brisbane. All of those newspapers would have been way too expensive. But now they've got a subscription to Domain, realestate.com, wherever they go, and there they are. They're selling property out in the middle of the bush, right in the heart of people's lounge rooms across the country.
Now, speaking of the bush, coming up tonight, we're going out to Echuca, which I know pretty well. That's on the Murray River in Victoria as we go around the grounds.
And
Mandurah. Mandurah, in West Australia.
And I picked these two areas because they're both regional areas that they're strong in their own right, and they both have very, very unique differences, although they are similar in some respect, particularly in lifestyle. Yeah. And we're going to hear from Andrew at Echuca, who's a very experienced real estate practitioner there, and Craig Balme, who runs one of the most successful real estate companies in the country, ex-AFL footballer. You might recognise the name.
Okay.
I think, his brother is Neil Balme. So
excellent.
There you are.
I love AFL.
I get it all wrong, whether he's on Collingwood or something. They always kick me in the head.
That's okay, mate. Look, I love the game, but my attention to details, not so great.
Okay. Well, you should see me standing next to Craig. I always say that when we get photographs for awards, he got one the other night, we get a head and shoulders shot. My head and his shoulders. He's a big guy.
Very good. So that's coming up, and then we'll have a look at auction clearance rates across the nation with Matt Shalhoub. And as well, Chris Gray's going to join us. I think you may come across his path at Sky News on a Monday night, because we see you on Sky News Mondays, don't we? Yeah,
Chris has had the show running for years. I've been on the show now. This is the 5th year with Chris every Monday night. It changed from Fridays, Mondays, and we talk real estate for half an hour, and it's great. He also, I get a chance to talk about the stats, and he brings on some guests and some properties that are being advertised around the countryside. So it's good. He's going to talk about buyer's agents, because that's really what he's all about, and he's got an interesting story, because he's one of the guys that owns a lot of investment properties but rents where he lives. So it'd be a good question for you to ask him.
Really?
Yeah.
Excellent. A mate of mine years ago said, well, I can't afford to buy where I want to live, so I'll rent where I want to be. Yeah. 13 12 83 is our number as well. Charles Tarbey, if you have any questions, is here to take your calls for the next 40-odd minutes.
And also, Nick, if sometimes people don't want to call, they can call here, leave their details, and I'll give them a call back after the show.
Yeah, sure thing. Great. That's good to know. Or you can email, click feedback at talkinglifestyle.com.au. So, Charles, in the game tonight, we'll do a market wrap. You're always across things, and Mondays is a time when you get whacked by a lot of data, I think.
Yeah, it is. And it's been quite an incredible week because you know how the talk was just a few weeks back that we'd reached the peak and the market has gone and whatever. Wow. Well, has that really been turned upside down, that theory? Because Melbourne, as an example, they had 1,120 auctions that were registered and they had a clearance rate of 70... Well, it's actually on my figures of 79.2% was their actual clearance rate. Some of the figures are showing at 80, but the actual numbers at the end of the day, come Monday, 79.2.
Wow.
And Sydney had a clearance rate of 80.7. And the number of auctions in Sydney were 880 auctions. So I don't know where it's all heading, but even Adelaide, even Brisbane, even Canberra, even Perth, all had good clearance rates for auctions. And more importantly, they had better clearance, and Matt will talk about this in detail with his team on the ground. But more importantly, the clearance rates in every single capital city I just mentioned were higher today than they were this time last year when we were right in the middle of it.
Okay. All right. Any ideas why? What's your insight there?
I think that what people have forgotten is that there might be less interest, there might be fewer people out and about, there might be people sitting on the fence concerned.
You think so?
Yes,
yeah,
I think that's what's out there. But what they fail to recognise is even without those people, even without those various groups of people, there's always has been enough people. You only need one person to bid at an auction to buy it. And it doesn't matter how many people turn up. If there's somebody that wants to buy it, they'll buy it. And I think it then comes down to the skill of the auctioneer and the agent, which is where I see the market heading, because the skill of the auctioneer is calling the numbers, and people were bidding in the last few years. It's getting now to the point where the real estate practitioner and the auctioneer have got to work together to bond the buyer and the seller. Whereas you'd say in the last year it would have been a lot easier just to stand up and yell out numbers and people will accept them.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, look, I'm keen on your thoughts on this one. Like, obviously people, want to maintain a bit of anonymity or maybe play their cards a little close to their chest when they're buying and not reveal to an agent what their budget might be. Is that going to work for them or against them? Like, what kind of relationship is successful for a buyer?
It's a very,
when it comes to the one with the agent.
It's a very important relationship because an agent will work with people if they understand their needs and requirements. Now, I know some people don't want to tell you what price they're going to pay, and it happens all the time. When I was listing and selling real estate, people would say, "Oh, I'll only go to this price," and then all of a sudden, the home will come up for a little bit more, and it would be sold. And they'd say, "Well, why didn't you tell me about that?" I said, "Well, you only told me you'd go to the." "Oh, yeah, but we would have paid more." And it is a story out there you hear all the time. I think it's safer to work with the real estate practitioner once you've built a relationship with them. If you haven't got that relationship, you're going to keep it close to your chest. I certainly know when I bid on behalf of people at auctions, I speak to the agents. I ask them, "Is there any special conditions, anything I need to know? I'll be over there. My client is interested in the property," and I'll let them know. And they always look over, and I say, "Not yet, not yet, not yet, not yet," and then I'll attack with a good, strong bid. And I think that's where a lot of people fall backwards. They think they're going to steal a property. Nobody's here, I'm going to buy it. Well, the owner's not going to take it. Just because it's an auction, they don't have to take the highest offer.
Yeah. Okay, 13 12 83, good advice. Charles Tarbey here tonight, and if you have any questions about real estate, he's here to help you. Now, here's a question. Would you pay $1.4 million for a house that has an outside dunny, 16 people registered for a 2-bedroom unrenovated home at Clempton Park in New South Wales, undeterred that the only toilet was outside?
Who was the reporter? Right.
That was Anita Balalovsky, and that Canterbury Bankstown Express. Choice words. Right, yeah. Nice, interesting. But that's big bucks, right, for a home without an interior dunny?
It certainly is. I guess the people must have lived there for a long time and gotten used to the fact that they didn't need a toilet. I mean, there were plenty of homes in those days going back that didn't have a toilet, so I can understand. But a lot of money, $1.4 million. Now, I'm wondering whether that is on a busy road or whether it's in a quiet street. But still, this is what's happening with the marketplace. If you want to buy an apartment, or a townhouse, you're going to pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Clempton Park's a great location just down the road. You've got Earlwood, which has become so expensive through that area. Beautiful views you get now in parts of Earlwood across the city, and down to the airport. Of course, the planes do have a tendency to fly through there. You've got Bardwell Park down there. You've got the golf courses down there. Campsie just up the road. Good, strong, very, very incredibly strong cultural area with a number of different cultures living in that environment. You can get all kinds of different food. So I think when you look at Clempton Park, it's sort of right in the centre. And you know what, Nick? It goes back to that conversation we've had so many times about buying homes in suburbs in between those ones that you hear about all the time.
This is an in-betweener, isn't it?
That's an in-betweener.
And this is a great opportunity. It's got a flat block. It's completely unrenovated. 2 bedrooms. Like the tapware in the bathroom is 70 years old. The guy who lives there is 93 years old. So, to me, I like a challenge. This would be a good one because the bones are decent. It's a double brick house with a tile roof.
Lived there for 65 years without a toilet inside.
Classic.
There you go.
Fit as a fiddle.
Okay.
Didn't bother him.
Obviously at 90. And he sold it because he's moving in. He's bought a property. He's moving in with his young 78-year-old girlfriend. So in a new property.
Yeah,
that's
good luck to him.
Yeah.
Just before we go to a break. So later we'll talk to someone from Under the Hammer, and that's the company that sold this particular home. So the opening bid was $1.1 million, but it sold at $1.395.
Yeah.
Just how hard is it for estate agents to land 10% either side of what they say to potential buyers it may begin at?
The industry's gotten into a lot of trouble over this, and it's not generally not the agent's fault because the market has been moving so quickly and the bidding has been so furious that people go over the reserve prices that they even were going to pay. And I see that a lot. Saw that a lot of auctions where people would just elbow each other and say, look, we don't want to miss out, and they'd pay more. The agents can only talk so much about what's been for sale or sold or is for sale as comparison. That's all we can do as an industry. But I remember seeing a property go to auction for sold for hundreds of thousands more than anybody could have picked, and it just happened to be these two couples, and they were arguing, but they wanted ownership of this corner property near a shopping centre in Melbourne, in Melbourne suburb, and they wanted it. And it turns out that the zoning there has got the potential for change, and they wanted to build their business there, and they paid more than the agent or the seller could even imagine.
Yeah, good stuff. 13 12 83. Charles Tarbey here tonight. If you've got a call and a question for him, get on the blower now. Charles can guide you through any real estate questions you may have. Chris Gray from Sky News Business joins us next. 7:24. Century 21 is the world's largest real estate company. So how does that help you sell your home in your neighbourhood? It gives your local Century 21 office access to the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Each office is independently owned and operated, so your local Century 21 agent knows your city and your neighbourhood. They know how to get things done locally. Being part of a bigger picture allows Century 21 agents to offer a better level of service. They're drawing on the experience and resources of over 300 offices around Australia, and that number's growing. Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Whether you're buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent, contact your local Century 21 office to see why they're really smarter, bolder and faster. That's a fact. They are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. Charles Tarbey here tonight from Century 21, taking your calls on all things real estate. 13 12 83. If you're buying a property, saving every dollar is high on people's priority list. So to suggest you ought to pay someone thousands of dollars to buy one for you may seem counterintuitive, but it's becoming increasingly popular to use a buyer's agent. But why would you? To answer that, we're joined by Chris Gray. He's a noted property guru, the founder and CEO of Your Empire Buyers Agents, and host of Your Property Empire on Sky News Business, Mondays at 9. Hello, Chris.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Hey, Chris, I know how important a buyer's agent is because I know how many professional people don't have a lot of time out there to trust somebody to go out and buy the right property for them. But can you explain, because you've been doing this for a long time, just in simple terms, what a buyer's agent really is?
Sure, and it's still a fairly new thing around the world. And I guess the whole idea of why would you use a sales agent? Well, if you don't sell property every day, if you think you could sell it for $1 million and you pay a good sales agent, maybe they'll get you $1.05 million or 1.1. The same goes for the buyer's agent. So we're almost opposite to the sales agent. So look, anyone can go and buy a property, and let's just say you can go and buy it for $1 million. But we know that certain areas have got massive demand and there's no stock. And at auction, we see front page of the paper all the time, this sold for 100 or 200 grand over reserve. So the idea of a buyer's agent is to have a professional negotiate for you, to maybe avoid buying the wrong property in the first place, and then when you do find the right one, to pay a reasonable price for it, rather than paying an emotional 5 or 10% more.
Because, see, I guess, Nick, what Chris is doing as well, you're building relationships with these investors, because it's not just one property generally too, Chris. They're back and forward for more each and every time you do something better for them.
Yes, so look, we have some young people that are in their 20s that might buy every 3 years because they're on reasonably low income and they're building their equity. And there's other people that suddenly they've had enough of the stock market, or they bought in the wrong areas and the properties haven't gone up, and they come to us and they might buy 5 or 10 at a time, which seems ridiculous. But a lot of people have still got a lot of money in Australia and still want to invest in property, because no matter what you read in the media, property is still a pretty stable asset to invest in.
So, Chris, are you mainly buying for investors, or are you buying homes for people to live in? Because that's a very personal thing.
Sure. So a lot of what we buy is generally for investors or for people buying more expensive homes. But other buyers agents around the country might do 100% home buyers, or they might do 50-50. And yes, it is a different thing. So when you're dealing with the home buyers, you've got to add the emotion in there. And that might be 50 or 75% of the decision, and only 25% is financial. Whereas other people say, look, sure, I want to buy my own home, but I'd rather buy something that goes up in value. So maybe only 25% of the decision is actually an emotional decision.
You know, typically in the US, you're finding now that because they charge such high commissions, Chris, you'll get an agent who lists a property for sale, and then they'll put on an open for inspection, not for buyers, but for all other real estate agents to come along who might have buyers.
Yeah, so the US model works slightly differently. So, as you say, it's a higher commission, so quite often the seller has to pay 6%, but 3% of that goes to the buyer's agent and 3% to the seller. So where people say in the US, we all use a buyer's agent, it's not actually the same, because they're not physically paying the buyer's agent themselves. And so generally the sales agent then potentially got a vested interest. So
those commissions are very high, though, aren't they? Because in Australia you couldn't do that because a lot of people they complain about real estate commissions in Australia. You'll find the average commission in some of the city locations, especially now, is below 2%.
Yeah, so it's like 1 or 2%. But it's the funny thing is if you're selling a property in the US, you could be representing the buyer and the seller. So how can you be completely independent of both people?
Yeah.
Whereas in Australia, sales agents can only sell, buyers agents can only buy. So we're all looking after our individual client, which is better for the consumer.
So, Chris, how much would it cost me to hire you to buy $1 million house?
So generally it costs 2%, so roughly $20,000 plus GST. And so the thought process you would have is either I haven't got the time to go and see them, or it's maybe Chris will get me properties that don't even come on the market, or maybe Chris won't be going to auction, so he's not going to bid $1.05 million or 1.1. So depending on what your thought process is it's do I want to pay 20 to maybe save 50 or 100?
Now, this brings up an interesting point, because you have built relationships with a number of real estate agents. So if a buyer comes to you as a buyer's agent, they can be guaranteed to some respect that you've got agents that are ringing you up when something comes on the market that they think might suit you.
Exactly. So a lot of people think the buyers and the sellers agents are at opposite ends and we'd hate each other. But it's the opposite thing. Because and again, some people would say, well, why would a seller ever sell to us before auction rather than go to auction? But let's just say you bought your property for $500,000, it's now worth $1 million. And someone says, I'll give you $1 million straight away. Or you can go through the auction, you can go through all the stress of people coming through your house. You might get $1.025 million, maybe $1.05 million, but you might get $950,000 and you lose your dream home. So sellers come to us for certainty when they know we've got a list of clients. And if they want to sell for a certain price and they think it's a reasonable price, we transact very, very quickly.
Bird in the hand's worth two in the bush.
100%.
Yeah. So are you confident then that you can actually buy property for less, or possibly even take it off auction scenario and buy it ahead of auction going
100%. So
to hammer?
we literally never go to auction.
Yeah, right.
So maybe 5% of the time we go to auction, but also we bank valuation every single property. So bank valuations are typically conservative because the bank's thinking, if I've got to sell this very, very quickly, will I get $1 million for it?
Yeah.
And we then track when we don't get a property price to auction, we then see it sell, and if it sells for $1.05 million or 1.1, it reconfirms that it wasn't worth us wasting time going to the auction.
But of course, there'd be exceptions to the rule here. So like you said earlier, if you're in a really hot suburb, somewhere in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, that's really sought after, all that stuff flies out the window, I suppose.
Yeah, and so that's where people need the buyer's agents even more, because they know that otherwise, without one, they've got to go to auction, and they see 10 or 15 people bid, and the first bid is more than their what they can afford anyway.
Chris, without nominating yourself as a good buyer's agent, how do you tell a good one from a bad one?
So look, I think with all professionals, as buyer's agents, accountants, financial planners, is see where the people are making the money. So are they making money from selling lots of buyer's agent services, or are they actually walking the talk themselves? So are they investing in property? Is their advice good because they're actually taking their own advice? And then what are the things they're putting in place to protect the consumer? So i.e., how many people would get a valuation? Well, most of the buyer's agents wouldn't, because it makes their job 10 times as hard.
That's interesting. So they wouldn't bother to go get a bank valuation?
But no, because if you come in and say, right, I want $1 million property and I want a deal, it's very hard for them to prove that they're actually going to get you a deal. So really, they're going to show you comparables, whether maybe 1.1, and say, hey, we've saved you that $100,000. It's worth you then paying us 20. But are they actually really good comparables? Whereas if we go out to a third party and say to a valuer, what's this worth? His PI insurance is on the line. He's not going to say it's worth 1.1 if it's really only worth $1 million.
Chris, what's your tactics when you bid for people at auction?
Look, the bottom line is you've got to know what the property's worth. So whether it's $200,000, $1 million, or $10 million, you've got to know what it's worth, and you've got to know what it's worth you paying. So some people will pay more than the valuation because maybe they've been out of the market for 6 or 12 months, and if they don't get in, it's going to be 10% more. And other people say, well, look, this is the perfect property. I'm after something so unique. I don't mind paying another 20 or 30 grand just to get in the market and get my ideal home. But at least that's still a logical, emotional decision, rather than someone that gets carried away, pays $1 more than someone else at auction, thinks they've got a bargain, but all the other people before them were paying over the odds as well.
Well, if you've only ever thought about buyer's agents, now you've got a bit more knowledge. Chris Gray, I can hear hair and makeup at Sky News calling you.
And he's the only one that gets it. I don't get any makeup. It's just terrible.
So you've got a full head of hair, Charles. You don't need the makeup.
Get on you, Chris. Thanks for your time, mate.
See you later, Chris.
Chris Gray, and you can catch him tonight on Sky News Business from 9 o'clock with your property empire. That's a good chat, Charles, because I've never considered that myself. I like to think I can kind of do most things myself, but I understand why others may decide to pay a few bucks for someone else to do the hard slog for them.
Some friends of mine recently used a buyer's agent, George and Ronnie. They're partners, they're in a relationship, and they rang me up about it first, and I said, look, give it a go, and they had a fantastic experience, ending up buying a lovely property together, and they're living happily ever after, I hope.
Fantastic. 13 12 83, Charles Tarbey here tonight taking your calls. All things property here on Property Fast Track, and it's underway. Talking Lifestyle's $10,000 name claim. All you got to do is enter your name on the Talking Lifestyle competition page and then stay listening. We're going to announce a name every hour, every day between 6 and 9. And this hour we are looking for Pauline Richardson from Forest Hill. Hello, Pauline. If you can hear me, call me within 10 minutes on this number, 1300 385 859. 1300 385 859. Or if you know Pauline Richardson, get her to call us and be in the draw for $10,000 cash, and register your name at talkinglifestyle.com.au. Charles Tarbey here tonight. Nick Bennett with you as well. 13 12 83 is our number as we go around the grounds. Going across to Victoria now with Andrew Lochhead, who's at Echuca. G'day, Andrew. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you, Nick. How are you?
Well, thanks, mate. When was the last time you caught a Murray cod?
Oh, I haven't been fishing for a long time, mate, but I see on Facebook there's people catching them left, right and centre the last couple of months, actually.
Is that right?
They've been biting well, yeah.
The cod's back.
Yes, yeah, in a big way.
That's good. I
Wow.
say death to the carp, bring back the cod.
Bring back the cod. Andrew, Charles, what an interesting area you live in and you work in. Tell us a little bit about the lifestyle there, because it is a little different than most people think.
Yeah, it's, well, I suppose we're a border town, so we're Echuca on the Victorian side and Mima on the New South Wales side, of course. Yeah, look, it's got a great community feel. It's a fantastic lifestyle. There's probably not too many Century 21 principals that I talk to that I say, well, it takes me 3 minutes to walk to work, 5 minutes to walk to the movies, 3 minutes to walk to the supermarket. So we've got a lot here on our doorstep. But
Good luck to you.
It's a fantastic place to live.
All right, what's driving the place mainly now? We know it sits on the Murray River, which is beautiful. Is there some grape growing there? Have you got some fruit production? What are the main things that jump out?
Yeah, we've got, look, it's a mixture of agriculture, manufacturing and tourism. Not so much on the grapes, but we did have a lot of grapes in the Paracuta region. A lot of that's been pulled out for subdivision. There is still some grapes there. But, look, we're surrounded by probably wheat, sheep and beef and dairy farming. There is a bit of fruit grown, not a great deal, but a lot of tomatoes are grown in this area as well.
And a good music festival, I think, early in the year now. It's an annual event, isn't it?
Yes, it was fantastic, actually. We had, Paul Kelly, the Hoodoo Gurus. We had some fantastic events over the 3 days, so that's something not to be missed.
And Andrew, do you get people buying properties from, say, Melbourne and they don't live there full time, but they have their properties up in your area?
Yeah, we have a few, especially on the river, on the Victorian Mima side. We have a lot of Melbourne buyers that have properties on the river, and they mostly come up here in summer for the water skiing. We generally have a lot of Melbourne buyers anyway, because I guess the Melbourne market's been so strong. People can sell in Melbourne, buy in a lot of cases a better house here and put some money into their super or put it in the bank.
Yeah, the Melbourne market's absolutely hot. It's probably one of the best markets at the moment. When people were focused on Brisbane, we were talking about Melbourne being a stronger market because culturally and also economically it's a stronger state. And of course it's proving itself very well. We were just saying earlier on that there have been over 1,100 auctions with just on 80% clearance rate, Andrew.
Yeah, it blows me away, the growth. Look, our growth for Echuca Mima ranged in between 3.2 to 3.6%, and I just see the capital growth in Melbourne. It just amazes me.
Talk to me about the median price in your area.
All right, so I'll talk about Echuca and Mima. So median price for Echuca is $316,000.
Wow.
And for Mima, it's $391,000.
Wow.
And if I bought a house for, say, $320 odd, what could I rent it for?
Look, if you got $320, you'd be getting around that $350, $360 a week rent.
That's pretty decent.
That is fantastic, yeah. That is just so hard to get that kind of return, and also see the potential of capital growth as well, because that money does come. It does move out. The wave does move out from Melbourne. It moves north, moves anywhere it can, down to Tassie, and people gain more equity in the capital city, and they start getting or finding themselves in a position where they can spend more elsewhere.
Yeah, good point you bring up there, because we do have a lot of Melbourne investors that buy into our market purely because of the returns, and they just haven't got the money to get into property in Melbourne.
Yeah. And, mate, how long now into Melbourne on the highway?
It's about 3 hours, depending on what time you leave, but generally a 3-hour drive. I can be in Melbourne City, be at the MCG in just over 3 hours.
Well, that's the only place you want to go to, isn't it?
I'm going next weekend, but for those that follow the AFL, I'm a one-eyed Richmond fan, and it hasn't been a great 3 weeks for us.
Oh, it can only get better, mate.
I always get it confused. I said earlier on, tell me, Neil Balme, who's he with? Because we've got Craig on next.
Yes, Neil's with the Mighty Tigers. Now, he originally played footy at Richmond, himself and Craig. and Neil's back at the Mighty Tigers, which I'm pretty happy about.
Mighty Tigers, just up the road. I think in the old days when I was a kid, Mandurah used to feed into the Tigers.
You're exactly right. Some premiership players from the 1980s actually come from Mandurah, and Mark Lee was one of them that comes to mind.
That is very true.
Well, Andrew, Echuca is a great place to live. It's a great place to invest. It's not that far away from capital cities. It's in a growth area. What more can you ask for, my boy?
No, exactly. I'm very happy to be living where I do, and great market and great people.
Grab your guitar and pop down to the American Hotel. I don't know how the American Hotel got there, but pop down there and sing a few songs, mate.
You haven't heard me sing, mate, so I'm sure they don't want me to sell the place cleared out with me strumming the guitar and singing.
Good on you, mate.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Good stuff. Century 21 in Echuca as we flip across to Western Australia to Mandurah and Craig Balme. Apparently, Craig, we need to say, go the Mighty Tigers.
Absolutely. No, the big brother's at the Mighty Tigers now, so he's returned home. So he's very happy there.
I'm sorry to keep giving you up on that, Craig, and letting people know you used to be a first-grade AFL player, and your name is very, very well known. So, yeah, but it's also very well known in Mandurah, and what a great city. I mean, Craig, it's a very, very interesting place to live. You've got an assortment of residential properties, then you've got waterfront apartments, and then you've got canal living, and a lot of people invested in that area, particularly those, from memory, even the lobster fishermen from up north would come down and buy property there as well.
It's we had a huge time here in the early to mid 2000s where we had a significant real estate boom riding on the back of the mining industry, etc. So yeah, it really is a unique place. I'm originally a Perth boy, but grew up in Melbourne, but been back here for about 15 years now, and Mandurah is just sort of a very leisurely 50-minute drive south from Perth on the coast. Stunning part of the world. Every possible type of real estate available here, as you mentioned, acreage and canals and apartments and your normal sort of suburban
and the services, train line services, everything's been improved.
Train lines, freeways. I mean, everything that you look for in real estate. Really, you're within a very easy drive of a capital city, by the water. It's very hard to beat.
So it's definitely in a commuter belt.
Absolutely. Well, the latest figures, certainly from the city of Mandurah, indicate that of the workforce that live in the Mandurah area, about 40% of them work outside the city, the Shire of Mandurah. So there's quite a large portion of the folk here do commute to areas outside of Mandurah.
And since that train's gone in, and no doubt a better freeway, have you noticed a push up in prices?
Well, that really did align itself with a significant market correction downwards, because we just had really crazy, it was absolutely unsustainable growth through the 2000s.
Yep.
From 2008, a significant market correction, which did certainly tie in with the timings for the freeway and the train. But yeah, we have had a significant correction in pricing and rents received that are really only just sort of starting to recover now.
Craig, a lot of from memory, when I've been down there to visit you, if you take a boat down the canal, you were seeing a lot of the new properties, but they were vacant.
Well, it was certainly an area where there's a lot of holiday homes, that sort of thing. That was really the history of Mandurah. It was just a wonderful fishing village where the Harvey Estuary entered the Indian Ocean.
Yep.
And that's been evolved now with a wonderful marina complex, an award-winning marina complex, etc., and the canal precinct. So it's certainly moved. There's a lot more folk that are living here permanently now than there was in the early days.
And that's where I see the change, and that's why I think that the area you're in, with that price change that occurred, is turned into a very good area to invest in again.
Absolutely. I mean, again, just referring to the city of Mandurah, who are really very up with what they're doing. Obviously, they have to be, but they're anticipating. We've got about 85,000 people living here now, and they're anticipating that to be 125,000 within the next 20 years. So yeah, there's definitely growth happening here.
So, Craig, just quickly to wrap it up, there's been a correction. What sorts of capital gain returns are you seeing now?
Well, what we're seeing is a recovery. We've seen it just plateau, in my belief, it plateaued, and basically the median house price is very hard to identify here because there's such a huge variety of properties, from your low-level properties right up to your multi-million-dollar canal properties. But you still get a very nice 4x2 on a 750 square metre block here for $350,000, and that's, I think, there's no tangible increase in prices at this moment. We're certainly seeing more transactions occurring, which I think is a really good sign.
And finally, a good prospect of finding a tenant in a place like that?
Well, we have had some, in recent times, in the last 12 months or so, we have had some high vacancy rates, but I'm happy to see that is coming down. There are certainly lots of folk wanting to live here, so there's no issues with inquiry levels, but at the moment there's still a little bit of stock that has to be taken up. Yeah.
That's opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Craig Balme, thanks for your time.
God's country here. God's country.
Thank you so much, Craig.
No worries.
There he goes. Craig's from Mandurah in Western Australia and is a rampaging Tigers fan. All right, Property Fast Track tonight. Charles Tarbey here to take your calls on 13 12 83 for another 8 minutes or so. If you've got anything on your mind that you want to share, let him know. 13 12 83. Talking Lifestyle's $10,000 name claim is on, and we've been looking for Pauline Richardson from Forest Hill. Pauline hasn't called back, unfortunately, so Pauline, you're not in the draw, but other folks will be. We are drawing names every hour up until 9 o'clock every day. So make your claim, and to enter, just go to the Talking Lifestyle website, check out the competition page, and be in the game to win $10,000 in the name claim at talkinglifestyle.com.au. We'll check the auctions in a moment, but quickly, Peter's on the line, 13 12 83. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
How can we help you, mate?
Hey, I got a question, whether I should sell or not sell the property that I have got.
Where are you, mate? What suburb?
The property is in Newcastle.
You're in Newcastle, okay.
Peter, my own team are going to hate me, and so are the other real estate agents. Hang on. That market's still very, very strong.
All right, thanks for your call, Peter. 13 12 83. Matt Shalhoub is here. There's been talk in recent weeks of a downturn. The property market hit back on the weekend, though, with auction rates surging in Melbourne and Sydney. Matt Shalhoub was there in the backyards of Australia. Hello, Matt. Welcome.
Hi, how you going?
Good, thank you, mate.
Matt, good to hear your voice again. One of your boys was responsible for selling that property with no toilet in the house out at Clempton Park.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
65 years that gentleman's held that property for, and made the headlines. What was that?
Yeah, I think they just, people bid it on, undeterred.
Undeterred, unbelievable.
Yeah.
As I say, there's a market for everything, isn't there?
That's right, mate.
So, Matt, tell us, how do you think now, when you think about the softening market, which was once again dashed, on the weekend in Melbourne, clearance rates fraction under 80%. Mm-hmm. Positive, you seeing it same in Sydney? Is it still hitting the same way as I can see it in Sydney?
Yeah, look, we're still seeing strong clearance rates. I think we discussed this last time I was on your show. The number of participants is slightly down, but the results are still getting there, and that's the most important thing, I think. People are still willing to part with their money, and in my opinion, still some good prices being achieved.
Wow. So is this talk of a softening market just wishful thinking for buyers?
Look, I'd say it definitely has softened marginally. But I think, as we've always discussed, especially in your major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and probably Brisbane, it only eases to a certain point. I think there's always going to be what currently is an issue of supply still being outweighed by demand.
Well, certain parts of Brisbane are still moving along, but they're now talking about the fact that the climb or in growth that they were been talking about for months and months on end, and you see or you hear endless advertisements regarding growth in Brisbane. It didn't quite happen. It happened more in Melbourne than it did in Brisbane.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely the Melbourne market and Sydney market seem to always attract a lot more stimulant activity. I mean, I think the numbers clearly show that, even the number of transactions that take place every week. But I think you're right there. But I think these two major cities, being Sydney and Melbourne, seem to be avoiding a lot of the speculation at the moment.
How are you seeing performance in prestige suburbs, mate?
Look, they're still ticking along. Again, I think that the when you're talking the upper end market, say $2, $3, $4 million and above, I don't think that those buyers are particularly deterred by slight economic changes. I think that they're quite affluent in terms of having the money available, and they just make a decision whether they simply want to purchase or not. I think that one thing that I find surprising is the amount of people who can now afford what was once deemed to be unaffordable. And I think that keeps the market fairly active in that area as well.
Well, that's great. Now, you use that word again, that bidding undeterred. So there we go. We've got it around. It's going around everywhere now, Matt. Thanks for that.
Tonight's term. Matt Shalhoub from Under the Hammer. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
And Charles Tarbey, indeed, your participation tonight. You're back on Monday talking all things property Fast Track on 13 12 83. Have a great week, mate.
Thank you, Nick.
And if you want more, then head to propertyfasttrack.century21.com.au if you're looking to sell your home, maybe buy your next one, or find a reliable expert to manage your property. Drop them a line at propertyfasttrack.com.au. Century 21. And the news is next.